Notice of this meeting was sent to the local news media on Friday, April 20th, 2018. In addition, copies and notices were posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building and filed in the office of the municipal clerk on the aforementioned date. Notices on the bulletin board have remained continuously posted. Roll call.
Mayor Ellis.
Here.
Councilwoman DiGirolamo.
Here.
Chairman Corcoran. Keith Zwicker.
Here.
David Morset.
Here.
Jennifer McBride.
Here.
Dominic Vangelli.
Here.
Roseanne Rom.
Here.
Darren Bedell. Bill Duffy. Bernie Rooney.
We have resolution case 17002, Bourbon Street LLC. I don't think.
Yeah, if I could, Keith.
Okay.
We don't have enough for a quorum to vote on that, so that'll have to be tabled to the next meeting.
All right. Under old business, we need amended riverfront redevelopment plan.
Could we go back to the Bourbon Street? Bourbon Street submitted their compliance documents, so I'm going to proceed under the assumption we can pass this at the next meeting, but we won't. I'll do the review, but we won't sign the plans until we have the resolution. We may be signing the resolutions and the plans at the same time.
We can do that. That as long as we're ahead, and then if it doesn't go through, it doesn't go through.
Yeah,
at least we'll be ahead of the
I
game.
read the resolution.
Yeah.
It comports to what the plans are. The new plans are showing.
All right.
For my
Just,
service.
we don't have enough people that was there at the night of the meeting. That's why it got tabled.
Do you need a motion to table?
Yes, let's take a motion to table. Thanks.
So moved. Second.
Yeah. Roll call.
Sorry, wait 1 second. Mayor Ellis.
Here.
On the table.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilwoman DiGirolamo.
Yes.
Keith Zwicker.
Yes.
David Morset.
Yes.
Jennifer McBride.
Yes.
Dominic Vangelli.
Yes.
Roseanne Rom.
Yes.
That's it.
Motion carried. Under old business, the amended riverfront development plan. I guess you're gonna take over.
Yeah, 'cause
Oh,
it had
okay.
the wrong address on the flyer.
Oh.
They had 530 instead of 535.
Well, no, not that, but the one that I read on Facebook said Heckman House, which
Yeah.
is that over there, not
Yeah, that's the wrong building.
Oh, that's. Sorry.
See what happens to my skirt.
Oh.
35 Fisher Avenue, sorry.
Okay. I just want to make sure I had it right.
You did, everything else was wrong. You need to
Where is she talking about was wrong?
move the table. Move it closer.
Should have had a
Because this is what I have in the
rehearsal.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You want to move the table closer?
So where did it say Heckman House?
Now it's upside down.
Danielle, where did it say Heckman House?
They
On-
said it was
on
on
the-
the flyer.
on the
They
flyer
saw it on
that-
Facebook.
Yeah, I didn't cut out.
Oh, I can't read my notes. The lights will come back on for discussion.
Can we have at least one light back on? Whoever has one light back on.
Actually, I think those doors need to remain open as well.
Let me show on the side of the building. We can sit in our cars.
Maybe turn the lights
That's
out
good.
over there and leave these on.
Hey, Bill, what's wrong with that?
You want to put it on the
Straight
wall?
up.
Just on the
they're
wall. All
done.
right. Let's just turn it around. Put it on the wall.
Yeah, slide it down and put it on the wall.
There.
Yeah.
Who did that flyer?
Take advantage.
I saw it, but I didn't
Is this on?
look to make sure the information was right.
It's only been a year in the making. What's a few more minutes, right? So,
A friend of mine who just passed away was in the
can everybody see that? Is that okay if I leave it like that?
They took his house.
I don't know if I can. I don't know how. Should I either adjust the,
It took me only
Water
half
up.
hour.
It's like Thursday.
It's over here.
oh, there you go.
It's like
I'll
double
move
O
drywall.
section stuff.
All new appliances. It should be furnished. Then they
There we go.
Waste money.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, just like that. Okay. If you could leave one light on, I'm sorry. That's it. I think one light so that we can see each other. That's great. Thank you. So, good evening. And good evening to those of you from the public who've come to hear this presentation. So tonight we're presenting the Riverfront Redevelopment Plan and more specifically the district guidelines for Union Square. It is a public hearing, so we will be welcoming comments and feedback at the end of the presentation and after in order to make any revisions before it's finally adopted by the town council. So some of you have heard sort of the overview of this plan. Tonight I'm going to go a little bit more into the details of the contents of the plan. And I'm really excited to present it. As I said, it's been sort of a year in the making, and I think this is a really exciting beginning for the town. Really exciting things to come. So thank you all for your input. There's lots of good things happening in the town, and this plan will help with those in coordination with things like the new Opportunity Zone that was designated, work that the Historic Preservation Commission is doing, work that the Urban Enterprise Zone is doing. It all sort of fits together, and this is really the beginning of all of that. First, I want to acknowledge some of the folks that helped with this whole process. The town of Phillipsburg, the town council, the land use board, and the staff who helped over the past few months to put things together, to help coordinate and distribute materials and things like that. The Urban Enterprise Zone staff, and the JGSC group who provided input on the plan before you all are seeing it now. They provided some technical expertise on some of the zoning issues and things. The residents and the business owners who participated in the charrette last year, some of the business owners hosted parts of the event at their locations, which was really helpful. The residents, of course, for all the input that has gone into it thus far. And the urban designers at the Blaustein School of Public Policy and Planning who so generously volunteered their time to do some of the renderings that you see over here. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of those folks in helping with this process. So a little bit of history of the redevelopment plan itself. Back in 2005, the town identified a 2.5-mile stretch of the riverfront as an area in need of redevelopment, which means that it warranted a redevelopment plan. So that plan was conducted and it was adopted. In 2013, a study of the redevelopment area sought to make some revisions to the plan. That was done, was submitted to the planning board, and in 2014, a revised riverfront redevelopment plan was adopted, and that plan really kind of broke up the 2.5-mile stretch into different districts, which I'll show you a map in a minute. So tonight we're going to focus on the Union Square district because it's been identified more as a priority redevelopment area among that 2.5-mile stretch. In 2016, we conducted a visioning survey, which was done online. We had an overwhelming response of, well, by the time it had shut down, there were 400 responses to that visioning survey, which I can tell you as a planner is incredible. I've never gotten a response like that before. And the mayor tells me that comments kept coming in, and so we were up to 600 something by the end of that process. So in 2017, we took the results of that survey and filtered them through to a design charrette, which was held last spring. And that is where we had a 1.5-day workshop where folks from town came in and helped sort of formalize some concepts for Union Square. We had about 10 urban designers that came in and were stationed at different tables with people to discuss different parts of Union Square. And it was a very exciting process. We did a walking tour, and it was a big success, I think. So, and now in 2018, the results of that charrette have been incorporated into this update of the redevelopment plan, which really further clarifies the town's ability to implement the plan. And some revisions were made to the Union Square district. There's also some other changes that were made to one of the other districts, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But tonight we're mostly going to focus on the Union Square. So if you can see the 2.5 mile stretch, which goes all the way from the top left corner down along the riverfront, all the way up to the right-hand corner. So the plan, I believe, is online, right? So is it online?
It is.
It is. Okay. So you can take a look at it. It's in the Borough Hall as well. So you can see the colors a little bit better in person, but are on paper. So the different colored categories are the different districts. So we're focusing on the purple one, sort of in the middle, with the inset there. So that's Union Square. So the contents of the plan. First section is basically an introduction. It talks about the statutory basis for the plan. It gives a little description of the redevelopment area and all of the different districts. Section 2 is the public purpose. It goes through the goals and objectives of the entire redevelopment area. So you have to remember that this redevelopment plan is for that entire 2.5 mile stretch, but we're just going to focus on the one in terms of design guidelines. So the goals and objectives are for the entire redevelopment area. Section 3, the redevelopment plan itself, goes through an overview of the plan, definitions and waivers, so definitions of words that are typically used throughout the plan that may not be common, that would need to be defined. It talks about waivers where at any time a developer or redeveloper came in and wanted to do a project and follow the redevelopment plan, the planning board has the opportunity to approve waivers as long as those waivers don't impair the intent of the plan. But that is something that developers can look to do, design standards, things like that. They can ask for waivers on certain things. It goes through each of the districts, 1 through 6. It talks about the zoning regulations, the bulk, design, and architectural standards for each of those. So the next section, then, the general provisions, the relationship to the zoning ordinance. So once the redevelopment plan is adopted, this now supersedes the current zoning in those different areas along the riverfront. Not for the entire town, not for the entire zone, but just for the redevelopment area. So the zoning that you'd see in here now would take precedent over what's existing. The off-site improvement section talks about any improvements that would need to be made in coordination with the development. So a developer comes in with an application, and there's certain things like infrastructure, utilities, perhaps open space, things like that would go along with the development. That would be the developer's responsibility to implement those improvements. Affordable housing, again, the developer or redeveloper would be responsible for any affordable housing obligation that the town has. And all of these things would be written up into a redeveloper's agreement. So there's a contract, so to speak, between the town and the redeveloper that all these things would be stipulated in that. So it's very clear what is the developer's responsibility. Acquisition and relocation. This has to do with the town's ability to condemn property if they see fit for implementing the plan. It may not happen, but it's a tool that's available to the town, and this redevelopment plan authorizes the town to use that tool if needed. And then environmental impact statement. So if a developer comes in and wants to do a development, they have to provide an environmental impact statement, which goes through pretty much everything from soil erosion to traffic congestion and everything in between, talking about the site and the impacts of the development on the environment in those different categories. State and federal regulation section just talks about the developer's responsibility to comply with the state and federal regulations. They wouldn't get a construction permit without that compliance. So again, that would be in the agreement. And then the relationship to other plans, this is sort of a check for consistency with neighboring towns' master plans, with the county master plan, just to say that this redevelopment plan is consistent with those. The goals and objectives sort of mesh, that it's not inconsistent. What we're proposing here is not inconsistent with anything in our surrounding area. Section 5, the procedural requirements, amending the redevelopment plan. So the next couple ones are more just process. At any time, the redevelopment plan could be amended. It would have to go through a process of authorization through the town council, because ultimately the town council will adopt this plan, hopefully. As a certificate of completion would just say that once the developer comes in, they develop their property in the redevelopment area, they would get a certificate of completion saying that that development is complete and it is no longer considered an area in need of redevelopment. Just a formality to just say that that's now sort of taken off the books as needing to be redeveloped. And the approval process, so this would first go to the town council, since they are the authorizing body of this plan. They would have to check to make sure that any development that came in followed the redevelopment plan guidelines, that it was consistent with it. Once the town council said, yes, it is consistent, it would come back to the planning board and they would review any site plan applications, any design guidelines, things like that. There's another part of this process which is fairly new, which is we now have a historic preservation commission in town, which would also review the application to make sure that, especially in the Union Square area, that the development, they can issue a certificate of appropriateness that the development complies with the historic regulations for the town. So there's a couple different steps there in order for a developer to even get approval. And of course, all of that process is open to the public. So if and when the time comes, we would look to have all of you back here to review things as well. The last section is just for all the graphics and maps and the figures. So, as I said, we're going to focus on District 2, Union Square. And the way that we did this for the charrette, and also because of just some of the environmental constraints along the waterfront, limit the kind of development you can do. And along Main Street, obviously, there's a lot that's already built out, so there's not necessarily any, more room for development there. So we split it up this way so that we could look at permitted uses and other bulk standards for each specific section. So you have there in the green what we're calling sub-area 1, or waterfront north. So, the purple is sub-area 2, or waterfront south, and then the orange is the Main Street area, which is sub-area 3. So, existing conditions. So there you have, to the left is the Route 22 toll bridge. Down the middle is the Northampton Street Bridge, or the Free Bridge. And then right in the middle is this nice sort of 1.5 acre parcel of parking lot. Couple of uses that are there. So starting from the left side, there's a few structures that are fairly dilapidated. Have the parking lot, the boat ramp, and then there's the liquor store and the hot dog stand and the auto repair shop. And then on the other side of the bridge, we have the gas station and the sandbar and some other uses along the riverfront. So, and then along Main Street, you have the mix of uses there, the offices mostly. So this is what it looks like now. Here's a concept for a site plan. Again, all of this came out of the charrette. So these were all concepts that were refined over time to come up with this concept. What we're proposing here is a series of buildings. Well, first we'll start on the left-hand side again by the Route 22 bridge. First thing we're proposing is a way for people to access the site. Union Square is congested with traffic, truck traffic from the Gulf Ransom trucks that come out and try to make a left turn into Union Square. So what we're proposing here is a new access off of the Route 22 ramp into the site. And then trucks that would come in from there would only be allowed, the trucks would only be allowed to come in that way and then go north to their site. That first building there that says Phase 1, the L-shaped one, possible for a hotel. What had come out of the charrette was that it could potentially be up to a 100-room hotel, possibly 3 to 4 stories high. And what we were saying was just that, you know, if you had a room at the top floor overlooking the river, it would be a pretty amazing view. So thought it would be a good location for a hotel there, with maybe some other mixes of uses on the lower levels. So as you kind of make your way south towards the Free Bridge, there's other buildings here. There's another Phase 1 building here, could be potentially mixed use. Offices, retail on the lower floors and residential on the top. Same with the Phase 2 building. The Phase 3 building, we're proposing to keep the footprint of what's there. Those buildings are historic buildings. We have pictures dating back to 1900 that show those buildings exactly where they are, so we wouldn't necessarily want to remove them, possibly just update the facades. The one that's closest to the bridge, I believe, could potentially go a little bit higher. So these are just, you know, again, this is all conceptual. This is something to put out to a developer and have them come back with their more final plan. As we move south of the bridge there, we're looking at more mixed-use buildings. We have the historic train station. So the buildings that are bolded are new, proposed new buildings. So opportunities for new green space, connecting to the Heritage Trail system. And as we go along the waterfront too, you'll see that there's things like we've added some new trails along the riverfront. So imagine you walk out of the hotel and you can get right on the trail along the riverfront and then make your way south and connect up with the Heritage Trail system. And then beyond that, the Morris Canal Greenway. We're really trying to look at linking this area to other parts of town and other parts of the region as well. We wanted to see more open space, more public gathering space. So we kept the boat launch where it was, but possibly adding a fishing pier. And then a little amphitheater, just a place for people to sit and gather, maybe hold events there. I know the Pork Roll Palooza was really big last year, so possibly a new event space for things like that. And all along those different buildings, there's opportunities there for event spaces on the lower levels, and I'll explain why. So this area is in a floodway. So per DEP regulations, you have to build above that flood line, essentially. So what we proposed, and I'll show you on and you can see on some of these renderings too, that we've factored in sort of temporary spaces, pop-up retail, farmers markets, things like that, that might just set up for the day and then leave at the end of the day, so that they're not permanent structures, they're not subject to being impacted by flooding if it should occur, but it offers more space to do to bring more people to the riverfront. You'll also notice along the outline of some of the buildings, you'll see a sort of yellow border. What we're proposing there is an elevated boardwalk that would stretch from the northern end of the property of the site down to well, as far down as we can go, I think. And you can see that in the middle picture over here, and I have one for the screen too. But essentially, it would be an elevated boardwalk that would feel like you're just, walking along the riverfront. You'd have your mix of uses on one side of you, the river on the other, and the reason we did that is because, one reason is because we wanted people to have access to the river, to be able to view it, to enjoy it, and to have space, like if there was restaurants, they could have outdoor seating there. But also, in looking at some of those older pictures, and you can see in the rendering on the end over there, the Union Square Hotel had second-story porches. So since we have to build above the flood line anyway, why not continue that line all the way across the buildings with an elevated boardwalk that people can then enjoy that space, have access to the river, and it keeps sort of a continuity of the historic elements of what was there, and in some cases what is still there. I'm trying to think what else. So just moving along Main Street, we're not really proposing any new development there. There's one proposed infill building there just to fill in a vacant lot that would, mimic the historic character of the other buildings around it. All of Main Street would pretty much be a mix of uses with retail and office spaces on the lower floors and residential on the upper floors. You can see over on South Main Street, you see a couple purple squares there. Again, that's another sort of temporary pop-up space, possibly outdoor seating for restaurants. The inspiration for this was the new deck that was built on Soma, the restaurant there. They did a great job adding some more outdoor seating on their building there, and so we thought, well, we should just continue that all the way down South Main Street at that level. So another sort of elevated boardwalk, but again, another public gathering space where people can sit out and enjoy the river and enjoy their food and their company. So as I said, we broke it up into these different sub areas because of some of the environmental constraints and because just for a mix of factors in terms of the uses we wanted to see in those different areas, how we wanted to bring people to the spaces. So I'm not going to read you the big long list. It's in the plan. But just realize there's a longer list of non-residential uses in the Waterfront North area. In the Waterfront North area, we're also proposing more entertainment spaces. So banquet facilities, things like that, amusement facilities, multi-level parking structures. That's something else that could potentially be, while we can't necessarily go underground, we can certainly go under buildings since we have to build above that flood line anyway. Another potentially good use for under the buildings is parking, where, for the commercial spaces where people would come in, park for whatever business they need to do, and then they could leave. It's not that they would be, their cars would stay there, permanently. It wouldn't be for residential parking. Other principal uses we do permit residential, multifamily residential, again, only above the ground floor. And then accessory uses are any that are customarily associated with a permitted principal use. So, it just depends on what the uses are in those different buildings. So outdoor seating might be an accessory use for a restaurant. So here's a closer look at that elevated boardwalk. So this is it if you're looking south towards the Free Bridge, which is there on the right-hand side, and you're looking into Union Square. So that building sort of in the distance is a proposed building. It doesn't exist right now. But if it did, this is a concept for what that could look like. So you can see that the lighting would all be, historically accurate, so to speak. You'd have access to the river via a staircase that goes down. And then when you go down the stairs, this is what you see down below. There's an elevator there also for access to the river as well. So potentially a farmer's market could set up here. You see on the left-hand side that there's 2 levels of parking. So again, the lower levels would be for uses that would come and go in a day. That second level could potentially be for residential parking or commercial parking or both. So again, all concept, but these are all ideas that came out of the charrette and kind of stuck to the wall when we threw them at the wall. So waterfront south, again, a mix of non-residential uses, and the residential uses were we are proposing would be multifamily residential, only above the ground floor, and really only on Union Square. What we're proposing for the south part is for it to remain a little more park-like, where you would be able to connect with the trails, you would be able to, rent boats, kayaks, canoes, things like that. So it would be more recreation-oriented on the south side of the bridge. And then in Main Street, as I said, non-residential would be a mix of uses, but none of really the entertainment activities in this area. We're proposing this mainly stay office, commercial, residential. So that's that. Here's another rendering of another concept that came out of the charrette. Somebody really wanted a Ferris wheel. I won't name names, but it's a good idea. It's an attraction. It's something, if you're coming over the bridge going towards Easton and you see a Ferris wheel, your kids are going to want you to stop the car. So it's something to bring people to the area. Behind that is a proposed hotel. There was also an idea for an indoor recreational facility, so something like in the wintertime it could be an indoor ice rink, in the summertime it could be basketball courts. So again, these are all concepts, and we just drew some pictures to help folks visualize. So design guidelines. I'm going to go through these hopefully fairly quickly. So for land use, again, so the different color coding, you have the mixed uses with the parking below, off to the left-hand side. Those are the blue color buildings. The H's are that a hotel would be permitted in those buildings. The darker blue are the temporary spaces. The red up towards the right-hand side are the commercial. We're looking to concentrate the mix of uses in buildings towards Union Square, so that we want to draw people to Union Square on foot. So they come in, they park, they walk, they visit a couple different places. We don't want them to come, park, go to one thing and then leave. We want them to stay and enjoy the space and shop in the businesses and eat in the restaurants and everything. So we want to concentrate the mix of uses more towards the center and give them a nice way to walk there on their way. Context and continuity. So again, this is looking at the historical elements of Union Square. So you see the hotel in the background there, and as I was saying, it has the second-story porch. That, again, was the inspiration for the elevated boardwalk. And continuing that all the way around to the southern part of Union Square, it was really important to, one of the conversations we had was, it's called Union Square, but there's really no square anymore, so we want to bring back the square. And the way you do that is by defining the street, and by defining the square with buildings on the, right along the street. So again, keeping the same element, the arched doorways, the 3- and 4-story buildings, the gabled roofs. So we're really trying to capture what was there 100 years ago with new development, making it look like it's been there for 100 years and hopefully bringing more people into the area. Street definition, I use the same photo because, again, it helps define the street when you have buildings that are there sort of telling you you've arrived in a square. Or you've arrived in a public space that's green lined with trees, has benches. So the street definition is another design guideline that's important for a redeveloper to be aware of. Plazas, courtyards, and open space. So in the charrette and in the survey, folks really wanted to see more pedestrian-friendly areas. So whether a pedestrian mall is really a good fit for this area, probably not, but that, again, that's why we proposed the elevated boardwalk, that it's an area that is away from traffic. Still, you can access the river and people can walk. The amphitheater, again, was another idea for an entertainment space, public gathering space along the river. So those are just some examples of what we're looking for. In terms of building scale, location, and orientation, so this is a section of what those buildings along the riverfront could potentially look like. Again, we have to build we have to start our building a certain height above the flood line. So, so we're proposing commercial parking for the lower level, residential parking for the upper level, but all below the building. So you see on the right-hand side there, the little person standing on the boardwalk. That would be the elevated boardwalk with the commercial mix of uses on that level, and then above that would be residential. And then down below along the river, you see the little pop-up tent there, so that would be, again, for temporary pop-up retail. Complete streets is a term meaning that you design a street to accommodate all users. So vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles. We want to make sure that the roads that we design are safe for all of these people, that helps traffic flow fluently, that we don't get trucks trying to make left-hand turns into a pedestrian-friendly area. So in order to do that, we designated some new sidewalk areas. We connected to the existing trail system with new trails. And we proposed things like speed management techniques like roundabouts. Not that a roundabout would go there, but it's an example of something that is that could be used to help just mitigate the flow of traffic. So that is another design guideline. Landscaping and green infrastructure. So all of the green spaces that we designed sort of play double duty. They have sort of dual purposes. There is an existing riparian forest in this area on the north side of the Free Bridge. So what we proposed is to keep it, put some trails through it, landscape it a little bit, so it's not so wild, but also keep it because of its importance for stormwater management. We've also looked at incorporating things like green infrastructure, so stormwater management techniques that are not concrete. So they're green spaces that have different elements in them that would help absorb stormwater. Since it isn't a floodway, we don't want to encourage flooding with the new development. We want to try to mitigate it as much as possible. So, we propose to keep some of the green elements in there, not just as public gathering spaces, but also to help with flooding. Street and site lighting. So again, keeping the historic elements of the area. These are things that, if a developer were to come in with a proposed development, we would look for these types of elements to be included in the plan. Signage and wayfinding. Again, it came out of the survey and the charrette that folks really wanted to see sort of an arching gateway sign. This is an example of what something like that might look like. The location of it, questionable. I'm not really sure where exactly that would go, but it's something that can be considered down the road. These are also things that the Historic Preservation Commission is going to be looking at in terms of signage down in the Union Square area and in other historic districts in the town. But ultimately, you'd want to have a coordinated look and feel for your signage. So down below, you see a variety of different signs directional signs, informational signs, and that they're all coordinated, perhaps color coordinated. The fonts are the same, and they all, would have a historic look about them. So, again, these are elements that are incorporated into this redevelopment plan, and that a developer would have to adhere to. Last but certainly not least, is sustainable design. One of the things that we proposed, again, since this is, again, in a flood zone, that any mechanical systems that are related to the uses be located on higher floors. So that if there ever is a flood, there's not a total loss for whatever that business is. If it's a restaurant, the kitchens should be on higher floors. So that's, in terms of sustainable design, that's one element of it. Of course, we'd like to see things like green roofs and, the green infrastructure is certainly an element of sustainable design. This picture on the lower right-hand corner is a historic train station that was repurposed into an office building and is LEED certified. That's like the ultimate goal. And in the redevelopment plan, we do encourage LEED certification. It's certainly not mandatory, but any type of sustainable elements that a developer can include in their plan would be, I think would be looked on favorably. So, so with that, the architectural standards, again, really just sort of aim to restore the facades, repair existing facades rather than replace. If new materials have to be used, we want to make sure they're as historically accurate as possible. And again, the Historic Preservation Commission is going to be reviewing any plans that are in Union Square. I think I failed to mention that Union Square is a historic district. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. So, so now that we have a Historic Preservation Commission, they have the authority to review these applications and deem them appropriate for the area or not. So I should say the look and feel of it. They would work with the developer to come up with a design that satisfied the Historic Preservation Commission. And then before that, or after the Historic Preservation Commission, it would go to the Planning Board. So there's opportunity there to review. Again, I'll leave you with this photo because I just think it's really great. It just tells a nice story, I think, about what the potential is for Union Square and for the riverfront. So the next steps. So tonight, what I'm hoping will happen is the Planning Board will make a recommendation for the council to adopt this amended plan. Once it's adopted, I believe we're going to prepare an RFP for redevelopment for Union Square, and we would go from there. And I think that's it.
Excellent. You did an excellent job, and I commend all the volunteers that put into this, starting with the charrette. That was all volunteers. I mean, no money from us, none of it was out there to hire anybody. It was all volunteer work. That came up with designs, and it's quite amazing what people's thought process come up with.
Yeah. I should say too, just for the public, for folks who don't know, that this whole project was part of the New Jersey Highlands Council grant program. So because the town has opted into the Highlands area and their planning program, we were given a certain budget from the Highlands to do this work. So the town is actually going to be reimbursed for all of this. It's a reimbursable grant, so the town didn't necessarily pay for it. The Highlands Council did, so we can thank them as well.
Excellent. If there's anybody in the community who has any comments, would like to make a comment, come up. You come up to the lectern and state your name, address.
Take public comment first.
Oh, I got you. My name is Tricia Cobble. I'm at 9 Union Square in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. my family has been in the square since 1933, and we believed in it all these years, and we're just ecstatic. Everything is, I could almost cry. It's just beautiful. Everything, it's amazing what the job that you've done. It's very impressive.
What's really nice is they're keeping that element of your
It's
building,
beautiful.
your grandparents' building.
It's beautiful.
It's
If you
amazing.
look at some of the old buildings, pictures of my grandfather's building,
Yeah.
it's very much in the same tone. I did just have one comment. I'm not sure if are you including the entire square as flood zone?
I don't think it's the entire square.
Because it has changed recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
It kind of cuts
Just-
across the bottom of the square a little bit.
It goes up Northampton Street. It goes right up the middle of the square now. So the gas station
Okay.
property is no longer in the flood zone, which
Correct.
might leave you some more flexibility.
Okay, great.
So, yeah,
Thanks.
wonderful.
Thank
Nice
you.
job, you guys. Really good.
Yes. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Lee Clark, and I live at 341 Heckman Street, Phillipsburg, New Jersey. I just want to say I'm so impressed by what I saw here tonight. The commitment to green infrastructure, open spaces, and developing trails in Phillipsburg is purely amazing. The pictures that I saw were just so beautiful, honestly. And I say this because I'm 26 years old, and you don't see too many people like myself still living in Phillipsburg, because so many people after high school, they leave because there's nothing here for us. There are no jobs. There's nothing really to do. But when I saw all this development, positive development in the town, it inspired hope, honestly. Now, I had the chance to go to the charrette when I was a candidate for council, and I had an opportunity to talk to everyone that was there and even contribute ideas myself. And I can only say that seeing it physically on this board, to see all the ideas come into one, it truly shows that the town is looking to move forward. We see all this progress happening in the greater Lehigh Valley, in Allentown, in Easton, in Bethlehem. And as a resident, it depressed me to see that we weren't really doing anything until now. In the last couple of years, there was more talk about bringing Phillipsburg up with the greater Lehigh Valley. And now we're starting to see that progress moving forward. I mean, an elevated boardwalk. That is amazing. That's going to bring people across that bridge from Easton over to Phillipsburg. And it still retains the historical and traditional value of Phillipsburg. So it's as if we're adding new development, but we're still retaining the spirit of Phillipsburg to share with the same people that are coming across from Easton, coming from the greater Lehigh Valley, and sharing that story with everyone else in that area. And that's what I'm so proud to see. It's just so great to see such positive energy and such a commitment to move forward, and such a dedication to bring in new blood into this town, because as a young professional, it gives me more reason to stay here, and it gives me more reason to brag to my friends who live in central Jersey, who are like in New Brunswick, where they're seeing new businesses come. Well, guess what? Phillipsburg is now finally on the spot. I'm so glad to see this. So thank you, and I would encourage you to vote yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're right, though, but in fairness, the history in this town has always been trying to develop South Main Street. It's not that it's just this board or this council. The last 20 years, it's not like nobody's tried to do anything. We are lucky now that the environment and the opportunity, and the mayor will speak on that, has come, that we are in a very, very good position, that we can give credit to history, give credit and the deservingness of where we are and where we were, and take it to the new level of complete green and all the modern stuff, and still not forgetting where we came from. So
I'm just glad to see you moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name is Charlotte Walker, and I'm the one that lives in that house that's on the Riverside Way. Well, my house has been built way back in the 1800s. So why shouldn't that be saved instead of tearing my house down? You know?
If you look at the renderings, I think it just goes to show what can be done.
Yeah, but go up further from my house. What about the parking lot for the fishermen? They ain't gonna have no place to park either then.
going to park underneath where the parking's going to be.
That's not the same.
There's 3 buildings that are going to have parking underneath them.
Yeah, but what about my house? It's a historical house that was built by the railroad.
And what about our memories?
The whole family has been
Wait,
working
ma'am, you
really
have to
hard.
identify yourself, please.
Tammy Dalrymple?
Christy Zubek.
And where do you live?
I live 274 Sigrave Street.
I live at 285A Lincoln Street.
This is our grandmother, our husband's grandmother.
Okay.
And we've had a lot of memories in that house also. We have been working very hard to bring the property up, to clean up the property and everything else. And we just ask that you consider the fact that we still have family gatherings there, weddings there, Easter egg hunts for the kids. She has a lot of grandkids and a lot of great grandkids. We're just asking, that you consider saving the house, maybe even working around it some way, because we're working really hard to fix up the property and everything else. Because she's been there. How long have you been there, Nanny?
40 years.
40 years. So we just ask that you keep that in consideration. That there's a lot of family that.
All 3 of my kids have lived in that house at one point or another.
And I've even had a baby born there, so.
Yeah, on the living room floor.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
So I would just say that everything that we've shown tonight is conceptual. It's not set in stone. So anything that would come before the board or anything, we would actually work with all the landowners who are there.
That's fine.
To work out something that works for everybody. So just so you're aware, this is not set in stone.
Well, no,
It's just all conceptual.
we had mentioned some things on the Facebook post, which I'm sure
Right,
some
that's
of you
what I
probably
wanted
didn't
to
see, but and like everybody kept saying, oh well, if they want it, they're going to take it regardless. And for us, that's hard because I understand. I lived in Phillipsburg 41 years. I lived here my whole entire life, born and raised. And my thing is development and making the town better. I'm all for it. But don't take something from somebody who's been there for forever. She just lost her husband last year. And that's hard for all of us. We don't want to let go of those memories. My kids love it down there. When we go into Great Nanny's, that's all I ever hear. They love it down there. Because it's a lot of, property to play on and we don't have to worry about them getting hurt or running out in the street. They love it. They like to go down to the river and feed the ducks.
No, it's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All them birds.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Vice Chair, if I may. Is it Charlotte? Yeah. I would ask you to do me a favor and take a look at the PP&L Center up in Allentown. And what they did there is exactly what you had asked. There was a historic hotel on that street. And what they did is they built the PP&L Center around it. It's still part of it. So as Angela explained, there are many options on the table. And one other thing, when the Vice Chair allows me, I'll explain to you. Your property values have changed dramatically in the last couple months, all due to U.S. Senator Cory Booker and another senator from South Carolina. You're in now what they call an opportunity zone, and I'll explain it when they ask.
If no other comments, anything from the board?
I do.
We'll start at the end.
In regards to parking and access to the river, one of the things that was discussed at the charrette, it's not on the plans here, and I don't know how much formal planning has been put into it, but one of the things that was discussed was that parking would be built up north of 22, up north of the development that's being worked on and that you saw here today, and then there'd be new access down to the river up north of the 22 bridge.
That still could potentially happen, and it explains in the plan that we really only went up to the Route 22 bridge. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. the redevelopment plan explains that we only looked at the area up to the Route 22 bridge. I know in the charrette we went above that, but for the purposes of just kind of keeping it simplified, we just left it to that area. But it's potential. You know, we understood that folks wanted to see the boat launch remain, but then we heard that folks wanted to see a fishing pier, so we thought maybe we could combine the two. Again, lots of options, and that could potentially be an option for the future too. So.
Danielle, you want to go next?
Oh, yeah, you finished it?
Yep, all done. So I actually have a few comments. One is I'm going to echo Vice Chair Swicker's comments. The master plan and redevelopment has been in the works, if I'm not mistaken, many years. And if anybody's actually, I read them. I actually read the one back in the 80s.
Oh, gosh.
And it's not that different. So you pointed out in the executive summary that the key changes are to Section 4, Union Square, and District 6.
Yeah.
Outside of that, they're really not that different. A lot of this has been thought out for many years. It's unfortunate it just hasn't happened. So a couple additional comments and concerns, because I do sit on council as well, so I'll express them now.
Okay.
You know, majority, it's great. It's awesome. The pictures do wonders for the visual aspect. The pictures were not available in the 80s. So the pictures completely help, as well as all the maps on the zones. So thank you for those.
Sure.
But I do have some questions about the district back by the Riverside residential area. I know there's a concern on the emergency services and roads, and I see Howard Street is addressed in a lot of that. Since we are going to look into adopt an entire plan, I'm going to ask about things other than Union Square, even though we didn't address them tonight. You know, we have some unique fixtures there that we don't want touched. I'm sure the bridges, and I know a concern with the emergency is they can't get under those bridges right now if there's an emergency.
Okay.
And there's a structure going up that's quite large right now in that riverfront area. The chief concern I know that's come into council has been emergency can't get there. God forbid there's a fire. So as part of that road work, the only place I saw was Howard Street talked about in here. And I'm not sure they can get where they need to get because of that. So I think depending on timing, what we look at, depending on the residential multifamily area, we may need to explore some additional road work back there, because right now they're not getting under those tunnels. The vehicles are just too big.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
And also, the permitted uses in Riverside Commercial. I'm reading these, and I thought these were modified in the existing plan that's been adopted, specifically the waste disposal container storage. Are we adding that back in?
That's new.
Yes, we're adding that back in?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay on that. Final comment is on the acquisition and relocation. You mentioned condemnation in your introductory bullet points. I don't see anything regarding condemnation, only eminent domain.
Okay.
And I know that was one of the things.
Then. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Well.
Okay.
I asked that for a very specific reason.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of eminent domain. I'll be honest. I'm not a fan of eminent domain. Here's my chief concern is for this reason. I don't mind a builder wants to come in and negotiate and buy somebody's property and they're all happy. I'm happy. Recently, we passed an open space ordinance, so we're collecting tax money for open space preservation, which I am 95% in favor of. The 5% was solely on the statement that said acquisition of land, because I didn't want to see taxpayer money go for acquisition of land. I'm not a fan. That 5%, I'll be honest, I don't usually talk about how I vote. I voted no because of that 5%. If that word was not in there, I would have completely been in favor of it 100%. I'm just not a fan of acquisition of land. I'm concerned that I'm going to see this open space money be used for acquisition of land, as opposed to what a lot of people were led to believe it was for, which was cleaning up our parks, making our parks nice. And I'm totally in favor of green space and having walkable and clean up Chappelle Park and I've been to Austin and all these great cities where the millennials are working and living. And, I've got a 21-year-old. I'd love him to go live somewhere else when he comes home, and someplace affordable and somewhere downtown like that would be great. And having the green space, and it's such a great idea and a great concept, and we have so many places in Phillipsburg that would accommodate it very well. I just don't want to see us displacing people at the expense of what we could be doing for green space.
Got it.
Okay? And that's just a personal opinion. It's not, I'm totally in favor of moving this to council, but I am going to have the same concerns. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Start down again.
I have a couple of comments. I did attend the Union Square charrette workshop last year, and what I liked about it, and we talked a little bit about it tonight, was the historic preservation and how critical I think this is. I mean, there's some concepts and there's some new structures, but Phillipsburg has a ton of historic architecture that can be revitalized, rehabilitated, so I think that's key, and I hope that continues to be an important part of the project.
I'm going to leave the mayor out of this. I'd like to close the board. I'd let the mayor explain what's happening with the Oz, with our UEZ, and how we would go forward in getting an RFP or an RFQ as far as qualifying people to come in here to do this. To just throw something out there and have some developer come back and maybe not live up to everything that the council or the planning board would want. Sometimes you have an RFQ and the mayor is going to explain about that, whether you qualify people ahead of time, then you go out and have something set up so that you have developers come in and they're limited to what they can do. They can't come in and give us 70 or 80% of our project, because that's not what they are capable of doing. So, Mr. Mayor, can you explain everything?
Thank you, Vice Chair Swicker. This is very exciting, and I'll tell you why. We started this process almost 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, somewhere in there, with experts from the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy. So it was some very intelligent individuals, internationally known individuals. I will repeat what Mrs. DiGirolamo had mentioned. There have been plan after plan after plan after plan. We talk a lot about these plans. These plans are made, they're put together at the cost of the taxpayer, and they sit on a shelf. I've seen it for 35 years, and they just sit there and they gather dust. Well, things have changed. And, we were lining up the planets with our plans and, looking at and evaluating the older plans and putting them all together for a master plan. And then all of a sudden, one day, out of the blue, the last planet aligns itself, and it comes in the form of a letter from U.S. Senator Cory Booker. Be prepared. You're going to get notice of what he called an opportunity zone. U.S. Senator Cory Booker and a senator from South Carolina named Tim Smith negotiated with President Trump during the 2017 the tax revision and jobs plan to insert an opportunity zone. So what is an opportunity zone? We call it an Oz, but not like the Wizard of Oz. And what it is that, say, Mr. Mandry decides to invest his $10 million in the riverfront and to buy property, negotiate, or enhance what is pre-existing. If he builds and sells, he'll get a 2.5% tax break on his capital gains. If he stays 7 years and operates that facility, he'll get a 7% tax break on his capital gains. If he stays 10 years, it's forgiven. This is like a gigantic pilot that we would usually have to pay for, when people come into town, and we'd have to pay for the school children and municipal services, on the federal government. We were lucky. We were the last town in the state of New Jersey to be picked by the Governor Murphy. And he remembered Phillipsburg. He was here to do a presentation on fracking. He said include Phillipsburg in it, and we got it. So what does that mean? First, let me give you the outline of the Opportunity Zone. It starts at the toll bridge. It runs up down the Delaware River south to the Black Bridge. It takes a left-hand turn and goes up along the railroad tracks to Stockton Street, and takes another left-hand turn up to about just below Warren. That's a rough estimate. Over to the post office, down route, what we call the Meadows, Warren Brake and Tire, to the toll bridge and back to the Black Bridge. So it's a huge area. And it was based on the census, and it was based on the poverty census. Anything over 20% was included. So it basically stretches from the post office all the way down to the riverfront. It's not just the riverfront that's going to benefit from this Opportunity Zone. It's a major portion of Phillipsburg. The Hill is one of the oldest sections of Phillipsburg, first residential area, and it could use every penny that we could find. The riverfront is that mustard seed that's going to start the redevelopment and bring people into town. I was over at Lafayette College to listen to Mayor Panto's State of the City address, and he went on to explain his experience when downtown Easton started to go through an economic development period. The millennials came. I really don't know what a millennial is, but I know it's not me. And they started growing all around town. If you know of the silk mills over in off of Route 22 over 13th Street, thank you, Bill. There's a waiting list. There's a waiting list. So what we're looking at here is a stimulus that we're not going to see again. Phillipsburg is at a turning point. Ingersoll Rand is on the verge of starting construction of 3 buildings. Stan Schreck and myself talk about this all the time. So the northeast part of Phillipsburg is well underway. And now you have the Hill all the way down to the river. This doesn't happen in some lifetimes. We are at a turning point, and if Phillipsburg is ever going to change for the better and have a new quality of life, it's now. The properties that the people own, as Charlotte had mentioned, are going to be more valuable because of this, because investors will be looking to purchase them or to work with you to redevelop them. This is an extraordinary position we're in right now, and we have to take advantage. One thing that makes a difference for Phillipsburg is that we started this a year and a half or so ago. There's only so much money the federal government put aside on how many billions of dollars. If you didn't have a plan ready, or if you weren't prepared to hit the ground running, you could lose out. We are way ahead of the curve, as you saw tonight with the plan that Angela did in Cleef Engineering. And that is going to make a big difference. But we have the attention of U.S. senators, of governors, and of other very important people in the town of Phillipsburg that doesn't usually happen. And so Tricia Cobble, I want to just mention, it was inspirational what you said of it's a recreation of Phillipsburg. Phillipsburg's never going to be Hoboken, nor is it ever going to be the Gold Coast of Newark, Easton, Bethlehem, around town. Phillipsburg will always be Phillipsburg. We were a hub, and one of the major hubs on the Delaware River. If you look from the Delaware Bay to the headwaters up in Digman's Ferry, Phillipsburg was a huge hub that built New York City with its coal and ore and everything else that was transported on the Morse Canal. And what Angela, I think, did took that architecture, took that look of Phillipsburg, that feel of Phillipsburg, and just made it much more spectacular for the future. And that's, I think, where our future lies. I'll leave you with this. Lambertville was nothing more than a broken down railroad town like Phillipsburg. And today, I'm sure if I took every dime I had, I couldn't afford a parking place. Thank you.
Yes, when you get a Cory Booker and a Donald Trump on the same page, all that does is transcends that there's money to be made. There's opportunity. And you don't have to like politics, but you have to realize that opportunity breeds success. People don't come to spend or invest their money unless both sides are going to be willing to give. And that's what we have here. That is a tremendous statement when you have a Cory Booker and a Donald Trump on the same page. Something's got to be right because it's just two opposites. Cherie wanted to say something. I didn't let her go into the town's opinion. So, Cherie, I'll let you say that now before we close everything up.
Okay. Cherie Carney, 894 Hill Street. I have a question. Why are we allowing the waste containers on the master plan? Why is the change?
As far as garbage removal?
No, the waste, is this about LMR?
No.
No. And I'm concerned, I mean, that's why I'm asking, because LMR is a waste container company that moved in behind Carl's Auto Glass. I know if any of you have the pleasure of the smell of the sewage plant. Okay, I do. Sometimes it drifts up. Well, right next to them is LMR. And the LMR, I'm smelling garbage. Not every time, but I do smell garbage. And I think it's from them. And my concern is I have the sewage, and then now I'm going to be smelling garbage. And I'm going to tell you.
All right. For me, I'm going to defer to the mayor because that's...
Yeah, Cherie, one important point is this. If we allow these new investors to come in and capitalize on the municipal services of plowing and picking up garbage and putting the burden on the taxpayer, that's what we're trying to avoid. When they use those dumpsters, they're paying for it themselves. We want to reduce municipal services so we can reduce your tax rate. LMR, I think, is taking a different direction. Just so I haven't had a chance to talk to you, but through some land acquisitions and other things that are going on, I don't think you'll have to worry. By the way, I've been spending my nights down the disposal plant because I have a disgruntled resident down there, and I'd rather be home. But anyway, you don't have to worry about that. And I agree with you. I've been back there and I've smelled that, and it does smell like a landfill. So it'll change.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that this plan, and I would strongly urge all of you to not agree with LMR. I mean, that being in there just because it smells. I like to go outside and barbecue. I like to garden.
Yeah.
I just spent hundreds of dollars on plants, okay, just so I can enjoy my space outside. And I live up on the hill.
This plan does not include that district.
All right, I just wanted to be sure. I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. All right. Sure.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. And Councilwoman DiGirolamo said there's aspects of plans that you've seen back through about 30 years. Well, I've been here for about half that time, and people I work with have the lineage all the way back. I've worked with every planner that's worked on these plans. And I always consider most of these plans, as the mayor says, spiral bound something. It goes on the shelf and you don't see too much happening with it. When I've worked with Angela, we've been looking at this for the last year. When I saw what she was presenting, this was actually the first time I really got excited. As an engineer, I look at the floodways, I look at the traffic control that's going to be done, and your points are well taken. All this is very doable. The market types the market units that'll be brought forth for the millennials that might want to move in. They're looking for rental properties with riverfronts that are walkable communities. All that's there. And what really is making this a reality or close to a reality is this opportunity zone. If we can create a plan that a developer comes in and buys into with this thought that's been put forth by established planners, not just Angela, who I think is very great, but people from the Blousing School and well-recognized names that have such an interest to come and do this. I think this can just run, and that's really my concern. And I have to say this: the ball is really in play, and it's the leadership that has to drive this. And I'm specifically speaking to the mayor and Councilwoman DiGirolamo. The next step is for this to go to the council. And I think we really have to try to work together so people on the council understand what that is. And I'll commit my personal time to talk to people so they do this, because I truly believe this is the turning point of Phillipsburg. If we don't reach for the prize now, it's not going to happen. And I've seen this for 30 years, and 15 of my part, but I know it's been for 30 years. I've read the plans. We really, really, really have an opportunity. And the only thing from a technical aspect, if you really think of everything you saw today, at one point you're going to say, hey, there's a big sanitary pump station down there. And there'll have to be some relocation work, and that would fall into whatever plan, and a redeveloper would be responsible for those costs to make that happen. But I really urge the leadership of this town now to take this forward, pick this up, and really drive it home, because this is the future of this town, and this town has so much potential.
You're absolutely right. We could talk millennials.
I'm almost getting emotional about this.
We could talk all of that baloney, but Phillipsburg is a meat and potatoes town. It's a football town. It's a wrestling town. It's sweat. It's blue collar. Baseball. Well, I'll give you that. But I mean, that's what Phillipsburg always was. And this type plan, because of the money that can be made and the development that can be made, is going to be the over 50 crowd looking for one of these apartments, because they don't want to leave town. It's not just some young kid coming from the city. It's going to be the people that live in this town.
Well, I don't want to be over 80 and see it didn't happen yet.
No, you're absolutely right. We can beat it to death. I'm sorry.
Well, probably the first step toward realizing the plan is for someone to make a motion to refer the riverfront redevelopment plan dated April 26, 2018 in draft form to the town council.
I'll make that motion.
Mayor makes the motion.
Second.
Who wants to second it?
Second.
Charlie, second. Roll call.
Mayor Ellis,
Yes.
Councilwoman DiGirolamo,
Yes.
Keith Swicker,
Yes.
David Morset,
Yes.
Jennifer McBride,
Yes.
Dominic Vangeli,
Yes.
Roseanne Rum.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Before we get in too far, the minutes, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion. So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mayor Ellis,
Yes.
Councilwoman DiGirolamo,
Yes.
Keith Swicker,
Yes.
David Morset,
Yes.
Jennifer McBride,
Yes.
Dominic Vangeli,
Yes.
Roseanne Rum.
Yes.
Who seconded? Is that Roseanne?
I did.
And
No, I first did. Jen McBride.
Move on to approval of bills. Motion to approve the bills.
There's not enough escrow in the Bourbon Street account
Okay.
for the one bill.
And
so
we
can
need to
contingent-
send them a bill?
No, they have it. I just haven't had a response from them yet.
Oh, okay.
So
we can still approve them.
Yeah, just
Yes,
contingent
uh,
upon
Need a
escrow.
motion to approve the bills?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mayor Ellis,
Yes.
Councilwoman DiGirolamo,
Yes.
Keith Swicker,
Yes.
David Morset,
Yes.
Jennifer McBride,
Yes.
Dominic Vangeli,
Yes.
Roseanne Rom.
Yes.
All right, there no being any further business, you need a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good enough.